And my parents tell me, nah, dude, you're just, you're into this and you're not into that. That's okay. People have different interests. But like, there was a bunch of stuff when I was a kid. I was like, this isn't my lane, right? And so I think that that's probably been true for a lot of them. And I would imagine that more and more men being raised by a single mother is definitely going to lead to more emasculation of men. I don't think there's any denial that, right? I mention it because Jerry Seinfeld, of all people, is calling for maternity, being a comedian. But he says, we need to get back to being real men. He gave some examples here, talking about the icons masculine, but he does seem to have that leadership quality. Speak, yes, president. He had the president voice, right? Like he did. He kind of had that. So, Muhammad Ali, totally masculine. Makes all the sense in the world. Sean Connery, again, it was a different type of masculinity. James Bond felt masculine, but more like as a gentleman. More like, oh, this guy, people overlook James Bond because he doesn't necessarily come off as like threatening, but then once you get him in the situation, it's like, oh, dude, that's James Bond, right? And so he can be a little sneaky with the masculinity. He also mentioned Howard Cosell, who was a great broadcaster and one of the best to ever do it. Again, I wouldn't have thought masculinity first when hearing the name Howard Cosell. When talking about this, he said, look, I know I'm going to get some pushback here. He added, yeah, I get the toxic thing. Thank you. But still, I like a real man. He says, we just don't see this as much anymore. He was talking to her about his new movie, Unfrosted, which, again, everybody thinks is the worst movie ever because of some of the views he's already expressed. It wasn't the worst movie ever. Was it great? No, but it wasn't necessarily great, right? In that Unfrosted movie, Hugh Grant. And he said he is the epitome of manhood. Well, that's interesting because, again, I wouldn't necessarily, when I think manhood, when I think men, when I think masculinity, you know who I think? The Marlboro Man. That's masculinity. That's a man. Just out there on the horse, on the open plain in Wyoming, puffing down darts, you know what I mean? Dying early of cancer. That's a man, right? Like that's the Marlboro Man is kind of like, that's what I think of when I think of masculine. But he says of Hugh Grant, he knows how to dress. He knows how to talk. He's charming. He has stories. He's comfortable at dinner parties. He knows how to order a drink. You know what I mean? Not the same thing as a masculine man. There's a little Renaissance man factor when you start talking Hugh Grant. And yet still can talk to you about the pop culture, things of the day. And yeah, English, they, once you throw the accent in there, they always sound a little bit more like they got it going on and they got it put together and all of that. I think the best example he gave was Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was definitely like masculine. And I would say there's not a whole lot of those figures right now. I don't think he's necessarily wrong about that. People are going to point to the fingernail painting and all of this stuff that's, emasculating boys. But guys, like every band I grew up idolizing painted their nails. A lot of those guys are 70 and still doing it. Let's not pretend for. Now, the difference is people kind of looked at rock stars and went, yeah, dude, it's because they're a rock star. Nobody just walks around like this, right? And then people started to walk around like that. There's a little bit of a difference there. But, like, that's been a thing forever. I grew up the biggest Kiss fan there was. Gene Simmons, Paul, they all painted their nails and their lips, for crying out loud. Never once. I didn't wear a nail polish. I didn't do that. I was like, no, dude, because I'm not the demon. I'm not the star child. That's a persona thing. That's not a me thing. That's why I have the t-shirt and they're on the stage, right? Like there's a difference there. I am not the star child. And so there was always a separation there for me. I feel as if people like Jerry Seinfeld are going to get yelled down about this because he's a boomer and oh my God, and you just want to go back to when the world was yours. But he's not the only person calling out for more masculinity. As a matter of fact, he's right. Men are afraid of women, and we'll let 330-450-7625. We've been talking about masculinity because Jerry Seinfeld, John F. Kennedy, Muhammad Ali, Sean Connery, and Howard. And I suppose that's masculine, although probably shouldn't be considered to be. So, what are you saying? A woman? Would you look at that? So no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I wouldn't necessarily have John F. Kennedy as like a masculine dude. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that's what the opposition was knocking he and his brother for while they were running back in the day, right? They were a little elite and the limp-wristed and that. Now, doubt they were, tag teaming Marilyn Monroe in the Oval Office. Then it's like, all right. To me, that's just more Renaissance man, their own definitions. And I said, look, people like Jerry are going to get shouted down. Guys like me will get shouted down. You feel your world being threatened and you're trying to collapse to your relevance and like that. It's like, no, we're watching some things that are happening. And we're aware of what's going down. Again, Bill Maher just had to say this last week. My opinions aren't because I got older. My opinions are because your ideas are stupid. And right? And of course, people then lost their minds. He's secretly always been all right. This is why we always hated him. And like, everybody's turning on him now. But like, that's a thing, right? And so I think sometimes you just recognize things, you talk about it, and then younger people don't want to admit that you have kind of caught them in their little grift here. And so then it's like they're a boomer. It's not just the boomers that are saying it. Young females are starting to talk about how we've gone too far with the emasculating of men, that we've now turned them afraid of women. And like, this is, guys are worried about going and you're going to TikTok and be like, oh my God, can't even work out without my boobs hanging out in your face without you looking at them. And like, there's this thing that happens now where if you're on a machine anywhere near her, you obviously are creeping on her. Now, there are gym creeps. I used to work out with one of my girlfriends all the time. And we would be at opposite ends of the gym, and you could see it. Like, you could watch guys walk a little too slow by her and all this stuff. So it happens. That's a thing that happens for sure. But I think men are on their guard. And this young female influencer says, yeah, it's both men and women's fault what's happening to men. Here's her reasoning. Let's take a listen.
So I want to talk about why men of this generation are scared of women. And I think it has to do with a bunch of reasons, and I'm going to go into it. But number one, dating apps has made it so that men do not have to risk anything to go on a date with women. Back in the day, you used to have to at least go to a bar and risk rejection in front of your friends or embarrassment or any sort of thing like that. Now it's just guaranteed. Men can go on an app and just swipe, and if you match with them, they know that you at least have interest in them, so there's literally no risk. Second, I think that...
Well, that's a little true. I think that's a bigger concern, not for men being afraid of women. I think it's a bigger concern that people are losing the ability to speak to strangers in person. Much like people are losing their skills of talking to an older person. I say this all the time. When I was growing up, I had to call a girl's house. She was a girl then, she'd be a woman now. Okay, so like, can we not with that, please? Can we not? But like, when I was growing up, I would have to call a girl's house. And who would answer that phone? Her? No. Either her mom or maybe the dad. And you'd have to address them. Hi, Mr. Walters. Hey, this is Dan Stansbury. Is Lisa home? Might I be able to talk to Lisa? And you had to practice that, putting on, the best version of you. You had to practice that. That's kind of fallen by the wayside, and I think people are kind of losing that. I will give her that. I think that's kind of a problem. I think there are bigger dangers to the social dating apps than that one. It's essentially turned into hoarding. Right? The 10 hot guys have all the women in one corner, and the rest of people are just scrolling, trying to scan right or left and not really finding what they're looking for. And I think a lot like social media, you see people out there, they're hooking up, they're doing all this stuff, and then you start to internalize and worry, what is wrong with me that I can't find somebody through these systems? I'm old school here. I have zero, and I mean zero interest in meeting somebody on an app like that. Zero, no interest whatsoever. I'm old school. I want to run into you in the grocery store, maybe get introduced to you by a friend, see you here, see you there, whatever. I say a little of this, next thing you know, oh my God, she laughed a little. Okay, now I know that I can go with this. And next thing you know, we find ourselves at dinner and then at my house. I'm old school. Maybe that's going to, prevent me from happiness. It might, but that's what I want for my life, right? So I think there are bigger dangers than these.
That you at least have interest in them, so there's literally no risk. Second, I think that people having phones and girls always recording things definitely scares men, because
Well, wait a minute. Let's not pretend that only young women are recording everything. Plenty of men are recording every last thing that they do and posting it for the world to see. As a matter of fact, Gary Vee thinks the next big live stream thing is just going to be streaming the mundane. He said, if you own a hair salon, just put up the cameras, start live streaming it right now. He's like, people will literally just sit there and watch your business, even if it's sitting there dormant. They will literally just watch that. And I think it sounds crazy until you realize that's what reality television was. And so, like, I think, so what I'm saying is, I don't think it's just women who are recording everything making men afraid. That I don't believe.
They always think that, like, a girl is going to record them and call them a creep. Men are so terrified of being called creeps. I think it's, like, one of the things that they fear the most.
It is for sure one of the things men fear the most. And this isn't new. You know, men have heard forever, oh my God, you think every woman wants you. Every man I talk to always says the same thing. I have no idea when a woman is hitting on me. Like, no idea. Like, I have to be hit over the head. Like, so but men have been told, just think your ego has you thinking every woman wants you. And occasionally that can be just men. I think people are worried.
They never want to be that creepy guy, and now in this generation, everything's recorded and put on TikTok, so they're scared about that. And the third reason I think men are scared of women is because...
This woman, by the way, is crazy hot. Like, crazy hot.
They just don't have motivation due to pornography and things like that to even go on dates, and they're so scared of being, like, called a creep or getting, like, accused of something that it's easier for them to just stay inside. I'm not saying this is an excuse, and men, you need to get out there and get over this, but I'm just explaining why I feel like men truly are scared of women in this generation.
I don't know if it's scared or if they're just annoyed with you now. I think a lot of men are sick of some of the lying. I just want a nice guy who will blah, blah, blah. And then you meet one and what do? You friend zone his ass. Because he ain't the dude who feels like he's stronger or this and that. It's like, dude, some men are just tired of the lying. Right? And they're kind of annoyed. The pornography angle is a good angle. Now, I would assume this would be more true the older you get, but it's like, dude, is she really worth the hassle, or should I just go to X videos, exercise the demons out and go to bed early? Like, I think when you are getting all of your sexual urges met by going to the phone over and over again, and not only that, so you get the sexual urges handled there, you also get the dopamine hit of going online, and all of that combined, that is a powerful thing. When you are watching, and people made this argument with VHS porn back in the day, but when you are watching paid actors do exactly what your fantasy is, and then you're out there in the world and then you don't see that and you're not replicating it, I have read many a study that says young men are suffering erectile dysfunction, not because we, I don't know, made the frogs gay or put something in the river or whatever the hell people think, but it's like the overstimulation of this. And when it's not like a porn set in your bedroom, it's you essentially get turned off. That is a huge problem. I think the access to pornography has definitely made people a little bit more like, screw it. And I think the bigger problem is going to be the sex robot. That's going to be the bigger problem. When you can have sex with that thing and it doesn't nag you about playing 36 holes of golf on Saturday, dude, I'm telling you, I think that's going to be bad for society. Welcome back to the Stansberry Show on Rock 106.9. We've been talking about masculinity because Jerry Seinfeld wants to back real men. Start talking about some of the icons of masculinity from when he was a kid. He brought up Howard Cosell. I don't get the masculinity angle there. Damn good broadcaster, one of the best to ever do it. But that one I didn't really get. Sean Connery, I kind of understand James Bond being seen as like a masculine figure. You know what I mean? Too cool for the room. I wish I could be that. Tough yet stylish, that whole thing. That one I find easy to believe. Muhammad Ali makes all the sense in the world. And I kind of paused at John F. Kennedy a little. Like, look, he had the presidential voice and being a leader of a nation. All right, that can be a masculine thing. And, you know, a few of you reminded me, Zach amongst you said, JFK was also a war hero, man. He's like, that may have added to it. You know what? You're probably right about that. And that's a good observation there by you. And Jerry, older than I am, and probably had a stronger connection to that. For me, not being alive for that, to me, the presidency of JFK overshadows what came before it. Fair or not, that's just kind of my relation to the president and the man there. But during World War II, he commanded boats in the Pacific theater there. Kennedy's survival following the sinking of PT-109 and his rescue of fellow sailors made him a war hero and earned him the Navy and Marine Corps medals and left him with some serious injuries there. Yeah. Okay, that's fair. That maybe Jerry has a stronger connection to that part of JFK's life. You know, for me, it's ask not, right? Like, that's pretty much where he falls in. The Cuban Missile Crisis, that's kind of where I have JFK again. One of my favorite movies ever, I believe it's called 13 Days. Kevin Costner was in that, and that was about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I love that movie, and I can't get enough of it. I own the Criterion collection of that, as a matter of fact. Like, once a year, I'll turn that on. So when I think Kennedy, I think that. Now, Tim's bringing up a good representative of being masculine. And again, I was surprised Jerry didn't throw this name in there because of his age, Steve McQueen. And I just brought him up, I think, was it earlier this week on the program? Because, like, that was like a dude. That's a man. Like, that's a man's man right there. Steve McQueen, for sure, with Bullet and all of that. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Guys love that guy, mimic that dude forever. Somebody else wrote in and told me Hulk Hogan is the picture of masculinity. Yeah, for growing up, when I was a kid, I was like, that's what a man looks like? Like, that's a little crazy, because you weren't going to get to that size. You damn sure weren't going to get to that size by saying your prayers and eating your vitamins. That's we know it was true. But Steve McQueen, yeah, for the longest time. My brother's about 7 years older than I am. He had a love of Steve McQueen. Again, guys my age and maybe even a little older, I'm willing to bet you would have the Bandit, right, as Burt Reynolds. I just rewatched those not that long ago. I feel like the first Smokey and the Bandit holds up as probably going too far. If you loved it as a kid, you're probably still going to like it now. But that was a good, fun ride of a movie. I started the second one because I was like, oh, I actually like this a little bit more than I remember. And I started the second one, this is about a month ago, and I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like, cash grab, honey. I mean, like, literally there was no point for that second movie. But but the first one was pretty good. And so I'm willing to bet, like, for the same thing there with Steve McQueen, go back to Tim's point, I'm willing to bet a lot of people probably have Burt Reynolds as that. You know, my era would be more the Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis-ish thing. And Bruce Willis was an interesting action star. He wasn't ripped. Schwarzenegger was ripped. Stallone was ripped down. I mean, like, his body was insane. And, like, those guys looked the action role. Bruce Willis kind of brought more, to me anyway, my perception, a much more everyman approach to it. That to me, like, kind of one of the reasons why Die Hard worked, is that he felt like he could have just been a police detective who was really good at his job and kind of then was able to just yell "Yippee-ki-yay-MFer" and all of that. But that's why, to me, that's why I felt like it worked, and it made it relatable for people. There's a Steph Curry thing there, right? Like, people will argue who's the best in this, but like, a lot of people will tell you Steph Curry's changed the NBA more than LeBron ever changed it. Your kid can't be LeBron, right? He's not going to be 6'9", 280. Like, but if your kid's little, all of a sudden, dude, they can shoot threes, they can do this. So people, Steph, right? There's kind of that. And Bruce Willis kind of was the Steph Curry of that for me, where he made it, like, he opened the door of what being an action star really could mean. And the next thing you know, you got Mr. Tom Cruise, all 30 pounds soaking wet, and he's now like the new action, or at least was. Matt Damon, right? I don't think you get those kind of action stars without Bruce Willis slamming that door open with Die Hard. I could be wrong. That's how I see it. Kelly's saying, what about John Wayne? Yeah, John Wayne was literally that guy. John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, those were kind of the guys. Those were poster boys. Now, again, you're going a little bit more my dad's than maybe my brother's age range than me. I did just watch High Plains Drifter about 2 months ago. Still pretty good. And plenty of Clint stuff back in the day was great. John Wayne, yeah, absolutely had been once upon a time was like the guy people would mention when you started talking masculinity, for sure. So Jerry Seinfeld and some others, and again, a young female influencer, we played you that out. You know what? Let me just play. for you in case anybody didn't hear this.
So I want to talk about why men of this generation are scared of women. And I think it has to do with a bunch of reasons, and I'm going to go into it. But number one, dating apps has made it so that men do not have to risk anything to go on a date with women. Back in the day, you used to have to at least go to a bar and risk rejection in front of your friends or embarrassment or...
Well, I think a guy's still going to feel rejection on the app. Like, if you start sending out all these things, you're swiping and nobody's coming back to you, you're still going to feel that. You no longer get to sit there and watch that rejection hit his face. That is different. And I would say that there's more risk doing things in person than there is over the phone. I would agree with her there.
Any sort of thing like that, now it's just guaranteed. Men can go on an app and just swipe, and if you match with them, they know that you at least have interest in them, so there's literally no risk. Second, I think that people having phones and girls always recording things definitely scares men because they always think that, like, a girl is going to record them and call them a creep. Men are so terrified of being called creeps. I think it's like...
You notice what's interesting? She keeps saying guys and yet keeps saying girls. Or keeps saying men and then says girls. That's interesting because men get yelled at for that, but it turns out a lot of us are guilty of that language.
One of the things that they fear the most, they never want to be that creepy guy, and now in this generation, everything's recorded and put on TikTok.
Yeah, but men are recording everything and putting stuff on TikTok too. I don't know if we get to just yell at women about that.
So they're scared about that. And the third reason I think men are scared of women is because they just don't have motivation due to pornography and things like that to even...
Well, that's not the same thing as being scared, what you literally just explained it. I will admit that I think a lot of men have a lack of motivation of meeting women because what they're after is the sexual release, and that is easier to achieve than ever before.
Go on dates, and they're so scared of being like...
Well, women don't want to go on dates anymore anyway, right? I don't know if I want to sit here for an hour and get to know you. I don't know. Can't we just do a coffee date? Let's just text for a little while, and then I'll do a screening process, and then see. I'll deem you worthy whether or not we have coffee.
Like, called a creep or getting like accused of something that it's easier for them to just stay inside. I'm not saying this is an excuse, and men, you need to get out there and get over this.
He's right.
But I'm just explaining why I feel like men truly are scared of women in this generation.
Yeah, I think she's a little bit right. I think, somebody asked me, when was the last time men weren't afraid of women? Well, I think if you're the kind of man who's afraid of women, and really you're not afraid of women, you're afraid of rejection, that you would have been afraid of that rejection no matter what the era was. I won't deny that. You guys keep writing in your suggestions for masculine men. Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal. Neither one of those are my guys. I don't really like those kind of movies at all. That's not my thing at all. But yeah, we'd have to throw them in there. What about Jackie Chan? Yeah, I think I'm going to shut the door on that one. And let me see here. Alyssa says, don't forget Patrick Swayze. Oh, no. I forget Patrick Swayze. Absolutely. I've never understood the masculine thing with him at all. Like, every time, I remember the first time I watched Roadhouse, I was like, does he want to punch these guys, or does he maybe want to wrestle them on the ground a little? This morning, we've been talking about masculinity a little bit, because Jerry Seinfeld says, I like real men. Strange there. He called out a few guys that from when he was a kid. He's like, JFK was pretty masculine. Howard Cosell, that one I was head scratchy. Great broadcaster, one of the best to ever do it. But I don't know, masculinity didn't fall off of him. Muhammad Ali, he mentioned, that one I would give you. And so since then, people have been throwing out a bunch of theirs. I said, for me growing up, masculinity was the Marlboro Man. Like, when I saw him in the hat and the whole thing, I was like, that's man. I don't know if I'm ever going to be one of those. I don't know about it. And you know what I mean? But that was a man to me. You guys have a bunch of great suggestions here. As Kelly's reminding me of the 90s. Let's not forget guys like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal. And look, I was never a big fan of either. Bloodsport was all right, and like some of that, but like, dude, Seagal is, I don't know. All right, here's the thing. You could be masculine all you want, but as soon as you get the ponytail, it's like, yeah, I'm deducting points now, right? Like, that's, whether you're Furio Junta from The Sopranos or Seagal, it's like, once you got the ponytail, I'm kind of out, right? And so, okay, but yeah, fair enough. I think a lot of guys probably looked up to those dudes. Aaron's asking me about Jackie Chan. That dude was awesome. Again, Jackie Chan's masculinity was sneaky. You don't necessarily see him and go, man. You see him and go, funny dude that might be able to kick your ass in an alley as long as everything was written for him, right? Like, kind of one of those. I got a lot of Jason Statham's. I got a lot of that coming from the text line, 330-450-7625 there. Yeah, Statham is, again, he's a little bit of I kind of talked about Bruce Willis a little bit, how he's a little bit more of an everyman. And I feel like Bruce Willis, through Die Hard, kind of changed the action star a little bit, right? You didn't necessarily need to be muscle bound to be tough, right? I mean, Bruce was in shape, but he was never like, jeez, look at this guy, like Schwarzenegger and guys like that, right? And so I think it kind of changed that and opened the door, I said, for guys like Tom Cruise and Matt Damon. And yeah, you would have to throw Jason Statham in here, in shape, tough guy, but little. I mean, he's tiny, right? And so like there's a little bit of that. Although Sly was little. Stallone was not a very Stallone was not a very tough guy or a tall guy there. Are we talking actors? Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, those are the kind of people I think of. Yeah, no, that's fine. That's all fair. Mike Tyson, again, yeah, growing up, it was like, oh, that's a tough son of a bitch. Like, for sure. Evander Holyfield, for a time, yes, I would agree with that. So many of you brought up Patrick Swayze here. And I said, guys, that he's the reason why I never liked Roadhouse. I never bought him. I don't buy it. I don't buy him as the tough guy at all. The man literally looks like the Jordache logo. Like, so I'm sorry, dude. I just don't see it. Every time I see him with that mullet, I'm like, that was on the ass of every woman everywhere when I was growing up. His sideways look was like literally planted on the ass of every woman. I never bought him as the tough guy. I said, does he want to fight the guy in the bar, or does he want to wrestle him to the ground a little bit? Because it kind of feels like that's what he wanted to do. You throw that together with this, it's kind of hard for me to see Patrick as the tough guy there. Nobody put